What happens when country music royalty meets daytime television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Reba McEntire sits down with Whoopi Goldberg on The View, only to find herself caught in a verbal battlefield that spirals completely out of control. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a full-blown explosion that had viewers' jaws on the floor and social media buzzing within minutes. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two powerhouse personalities clash in ways nobody saw coming. Last night's episode of The View was supposed to be a lighthearted conversation about Reba's latest ventures, but what actually transpired was nothing short of explosive. From the moment Reba McEntire walked onto that set, you could feel the tension crackling in the air. Whoopi Goldberg, known for her no-holds-barred approach and increasingly confrontational style, seemed determined to push buttons that perhaps should have remained untouched. The trouble began almost immediately after the pleasantries ended. Whoopi, with that signature smirk that longtime viewers know all too well, decided to dive straight into controversial territory without any warning. "Reba, honey," she began, her tone already carrying an edge that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Let's talk about your recent comments about supporting traditional family values. Some people are saying you're being judgmental about modern relationships." Reba, maintaining her characteristic grace under pressure, responded diplomatically. "Well, Whoopi, I've always believed in speaking from my heart about what's worked in my life. I'm not judging anyone else's choices." But Whoopi wasn't satisfied with that measured response. Instead of moving on, she pressed harder, her voice rising slightly as she leaned forward in her chair. "But that's not really answering the question, is it?" Whoopi shot back, her famous eyebrows raised in that condescending way that has become her trademark when she's about to pounce. "When you say traditional family values, aren't you essentially saying that non-traditional families are somehow less valid?" The other co-hosts exchanged nervous glances, clearly sensing that this was heading in a direction none of them had anticipated. Reba's smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "I never said anything of the sort, Whoopi. I think you're putting words in my mouth that I never spoke." The country legend's voice remained steady, but those who knew her well could detect the slight tension beginning to build. She clasped her hands together in her lap, a telltale sign that she was working to maintain her professional demeanor. That's when Whoopi made the fatal mistake that would turn this interview into the train wreck that everyone's talking about today. With a dismissive wave of her hand and that infuriating laugh that has grated on viewers for years, she said, "Oh please, Reba, we all know what you really mean. You country folks love to talk in code, don't you? Say one thing but mean something completely different." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, as those words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Reba's eyes flashed with something that viewers had never seen before, genuine anger mixed with disbelief. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a chill that could have frozen the entire studio. "Excuse me?" Reba's words were measured but deadly. "Did you just stereotype an entire region of people based on where they're from? Because if you did, Whoopi, that's exactly the kind of prejudice you claim to fight against." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as America's sweetheart revealed a steel backbone that caught everyone off guard. But instead of backing down or apologizing, Whoopi doubled down with the kind of arrogance that has made her one of daytime television's most polarizing figures. She actually laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made viewers at home cringe. "Oh, come on now, don't be so sensitive. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The whole sweet Southern Belle act while pushing backward ideas." That was the moment everything exploded. Reba McEntire, the woman who had gracefully navigated decades in the entertainment industry without a single major scandal, finally reached her breaking point. She stood up so abruptly that her chair rolled backward, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to shock even Whoopi into momentary silence. "The sweet Southern Belle act?" Reba's voice rose for the first time, carrying across the studio with the power that had filled countless concert halls. "Lady, I've been in this business longer than you've been relevant, and I've never once disrespected a guest the way you're disrespecting me right now." The audience sat in stunned silence as America's country queen unleashed years of pent-up frustration. Whoopi, clearly not expecting this level of pushback, seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Instead, she made things infinitely worse by rolling her eyes and muttering, "Oh, here we go with the diva tantrum." The words were barely audible, but the microphones picked them up, and Reba's face went white with rage. "Diva tantrum," Reba repeated, her voice now carrying a dangerous edge that had never been heard on daytime television before. "I'm having a diva tantrum because I won't sit here and let you insult me, my background, and millions of people who look up to me. You're sitting there acting like some kind of moral authority when you can't even show basic respect to a guest on your own show." The tension in the studio was now palpable, with crew members frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let this explosive confrontation play out. Whoopi, perhaps realizing that she had pushed too far, attempted damage control with her usual defensive strategy of playing the victim. "Look, I think you're overreacting here," Whoopi said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I was just asking legitimate questions about your public statements. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't make public statements at all." It was perhaps the worst possible thing she could have said at that moment. Reba's laugh was nothing like her usual warm chuckle. It was cold, sharp, and filled with disbelief. "Handle scrutiny? Whoopi, I've been handling scrutiny since before you knew what a television camera was. The difference is, I know the difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately disrespectful. You clearly don't." What happened next sent shockwaves through the studio and left viewers at home scrambling for their remote controls to make sure they were recording this historic meltdown. Whoopi, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger, stood up and pointed directly at Reba. "You know what your problem is?" Whoopi's voice was now shaking with rage. "You think you're better than everyone else because you've got this wholesome image, but underneath it all, you're just another closed-minded celebrity who can't handle being challenged on your outdated views." The words seemed to echo through the studio as everyone held their breath, waiting to see how Reba would respond to such a personal attack. For a moment, the country legend just stared at Whoopi, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, not the warm, genuine smile her fans knew and loved, but something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Outdated views?" Reba said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume. "The only thing outdated here is your behavior, Whoopi. You've forgotten what it means to be a professional. And frankly, you've forgotten what it means to be a decent human being." The words hit like physical blows, and even Whoopi seemed stunned by their intensity. But Reba wasn't finished. Years of watching Whoopi's increasingly erratic behavior on the show, years of hearing stories from other celebrities about similar treatment, all came pouring out in a torrent of barely controlled anger. "You sit up there in your chair like you're some kind of queen, talking down to people, making assumptions about their character based on where they're from or what they believe," Reba continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You've turned this show into your personal platform for bullying anyone who doesn't think exactly like you do." The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the other co-hosts, who had remained silent throughout this escalating confrontation, seemed frozen in place, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch this legendary meltdown unfold. Whoopi, her face now red with fury and embarrassment, made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "You don't know what you're talking about," she sputtered, but her usual commanding presence had evaporated completely. "I've been doing this show for years and you've gotten worse every single year." Reba cut her off with surgical precision. "I've watched you become meaner, more bitter, more self-important with each season. You used to be funny, Whoopi. You used to be someone people looked up to. Now, you're just a bully with a platform." Those words seemed to break something inside Whoopi. Her composure cracked completely as she screamed, "Get out! Just get out of here!" Her voice cracked on the words, betraying just how much Reba's accusations had hit home. Reba straightened up to her full height, dignity radiating from every pore despite the chaos surrounding her. "Gladly," she said with icy calm. "I wouldn't want to spend another second in the presence of someone who's forgotten basic human decency." She turned toward the exit, her movements deliberate and controlled. But then she paused, turning back for one final devastating blow that would be replayed on social media for days to come. You know what's really sad, Whoopi? You had everything: talent, respect, a platform to make a real difference. And you threw it all away to become exactly the kind of person you used to fight against. With that, Reba McEntire walked off the View set with her head held high, leaving behind a studio in complete chaos and a host whose reputation may never recover from this epic confrontation. The cameras continued rolling as Whoopi sat back down, her hands visibly shaking, while the other co-hosts struggled to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. The dramatic exit that followed will go down in television history as one of the most shocking moments ever captured on daytime TV, proving that even the sweetest celebrities have their breaking point when faced with relentless disrespect and unprofessional behavior.